Welcome back. The next topic is theories of origin of life and theories of evolution. In the same chapter, chapter 7, evolution. So the first theory, we are going to see the theories of origin of life. The first theory that we are going to study is the theory of chemical evolution put forward by Oparin and Haldane. This is a widely accepted theory. And I also explained in the previous class about the simulation experiment that proved that this theory is true. That was put forward by Urey and Miller. The first postulate of this theory is the first form of life could have come from pre-existing non-living organic molecules like RNA, proteins, purines, amino acids, etc. Second postulate, the formation of life was preceded by chemical evolution, that is, formation of diverse organic molecules was from inorganic constituents. And the third postulate, the conditions that prevailed on the earth like high temperature, volcanic storms, reducing atmosphere comprising gases like ammonia, methane, hydrogen, water vapor, etc. facilitated these chemical reactions. This and all was dealt in the previous module. So, in simple, it is from inorganic molecules, organic molecules were formed, and from organic molecules the first life originated. Okay, but it is reversed and given in these postulates. You have to go by these three postulates when you are asked to explain Oparin-Haldane's concept of the origin of life by chemical evolution. I hope this is clear, and this was proved scientifically by Urey and Miller. Next theory. The second theory is the theory put forward by Greek thinkers, the theory of panspermia put forward by Greek thinkers or Greek philosophers. They believed that life came from the spores that were transferred to the earth from outer space. So what did they believe is some spores came from outer planets, from somewhere of the universe. It fell on the earth's surface, and these spores germinated into the various living organisms. So this is the theory of panspermia. Panspermia means from spores. Next, the third theory, theory of abiogenesis, or it is also called spontaneous generation. This theory states that life came from rotting matter, rotting and decaying matter like straw, mud, clay, etc. For example, from the mud, frogs, turtles, and snakes must have originated from the water, the fish must have originated from the straw, worms, birds must have originated, etc. So this was taught that, or according to this theory, the theory of abiogenesis, life originated from abiotic factors, and these abiotic factors should be decaying and rotting. So decaying, rotting matter like straw, mud, etc. This is also discarded. So the second and the third theory were discarded because there was no substantial proof. Now we are going to the fourth theory. The fourth theory, theory of biogenesis. This theory was proved by Louis Pasteur. This theory states that life came from pre-existing life, and was proved by Louis Pasteur in his experiment in two conical flasks. He placed killed yeast. Okay, killed yeast were placed, dead yeast were placed in the two conical flasks. One conical flask was in a sterile environment. It was made aseptic and covered with cotton plug. Okay, not contaminated. The other sterile flask, the other flask was left open. Okay, after some days he noticed that life originated in one of the flask. That is, it came from the open flask. Life originated here, but life did not originate here. Okay, so this is the experiment that he proved this theory, that is, life came from pre-existing life. So the theory is like this way. It states that life came from pre-existing life, and the experiment in brief, in pre-sterilized flask, life did not come from kildees. So in the first flask, which was sterile, life did not originate, while in the open flask, which was unsterilized, what happened? Life originated from the kildees. Next theory is the theory of special creation. The theory of special creation, remember, all religions hold this theory. Any religion believes this. There is a supernatural power, God, that created everything. So this is from the religious point of view. The first postulate of this theory is the world was created 4,000 years ago as such by a supernatural power called God. Okay, it was created how many years ago? 4,000 years ago. Okay, most of the religions hold this. How old is the earth? 4,000 years, and was created by some supernatural power. Okay, Christians believe God, Father of Jesus. The Muslims also believe this God, a supernatural power. Hindus believe Brahma, Vishnu, whatever. There's anyway, all religions hold that there's some supernatural being that created the earth. Then second postulate, all living organisms that we see today were created as such. See, what and all we see today, right from man to the cockroach, to the poriferans, to the earthworms, to any small, or to the bacteria, all these diversities were created then. Okay, it was not slowly, it was created at different steps. No, all what we see today was created then. And third, the diversity was always the same since creation and will be the same for future. So according to evolution, after some years, after some 100 or 1,000 years, many will perish and new forms will arise. And same happened in the past. They said that there were many other forms and they got perished, and we are the latest forms. But it does not hold here. All the diversities that we see today were there before and will continue today and will continue in the future. So once again, the theory of special creation that all religions believe is, first, the world was created by a supernatural power 4,000 years ago. Second, all living organisms that we see today were created as such. And third, the diversity was always the same since the creation. Once God created everything, the diversity is from then till now and till the future. Whatever may be the years to come will continue to be the same. There's not going to be any modifications or evolutions. Okay, so this is the theory put forward by special creation, and biologists have discarded this theory. According to biologists, the widely accepted theory is the theory of chemical evolution. And we know who's the father. Who's the father of evolution? Charles Darwin. And Charles Darwin challenged these observations of the special creation by his famous voyage on the ship to the Galapagos Island, and from his observations he concluded two things. Two important conclusions he concluded. First, he concluded that existing living forms share similarities not only among themselves but also with life forms that existed millions of years ago. This indicated a common ancestry. So the first conclusion from his observation was that all the living forms that exist today shares similarities among themselves and also with the living forms that existed millions of years ago. So what did he prove? A common ancestor. And the second important observation he made was the process was very gradual. The changes were gradual. It was not quick. It was very gradual. And it's an ongoing process. It's still going on. Okay. So once again, these ideas held by the religions, by the church, was challenged by Charles Darwin. He went on a voyage on a ship to different places around the world, and from his observation he concluded 2 points, very, very strong observations. One, the existing living forms share similarities not only among themselves but also with the life forms that existed millions of years ago. So what does this indicate? It indicates a common ancestor. And the second strong information he gathered is the process was not quick, was not instant. The change was very, very gradual, and this gradual change is an ongoing process. It will continue. Again in future, after 100 years and all, we'll be in there's lots of modification, as there's evolution in us. This is what Charles Darwin says, and Charles Darwin is considered as the father of evolution. Clear? I hope all these theories of the origin of life is clear to you all. So the theories are starting from the widely accepted theory of chemical evolution put forward by Oparin and Haldane. The second theory of panspermia put forward by the Greek thinkers. Theory of abiogenesis or spontaneous generation. Then theory of biogenesis by Louis Pasteur, and the theory of special creation all religions hold. And this particular theory was challenged by Charles Darwin, and he came out with very two important observations, and thus he is considered the father of evolution. Next we are going to see the theories of evolution. We are going to see 4 theories of evolution. So now we know what is evolution. What should come to your mind when you hear about evolution? Evolution proves common ancestor. And second, evolution speaks of very gradual change. Gradual, ongoing, it's still going on. So these are the two main ideas of evolution. So what does evolution proves? Evolution proves of a common ancestor, and also evolution says about changes that are occurring very gradually and it's ongoing. Okay. Now the first theory of evolution. So it's different from origin of life. Origin of life, how the first life came. Now we are going to see from that life how diversity is originated. That's what evolution speaks about. Remember the two concepts strongly put forward by the observation of Charles Darwin. It indicates common ancestor and that too the changes, there is changes occurring in organism resulting in more and more diverse and modified forms. Now the first theory was put forward by Charles Darwin, and this theory very famous, theory of natural selection. But the postulates in your text you have to follow correctly, the first and second postulate. Any population has built-in variation in characteristics. These characteristics enable some to survive better in natural conditions like food, climate, physical factors, and would outbreed the others that are less endowed to survive under such natural conditions. This characteristic is called fitness. For example, to explain the first point, I will give the example of frog. The frog lays eggs. How many eggs will it lay? Is it 1, 2, 3 or few? No, it lays a number of eggs. Why it lays a number of eggs? Only few will survive into tadpoles, and of those tadpoles only few will survive into the adult. So what are these eggs subjected to? We have learned we are subjected to a lot of environmental stress like predation, scarcity of food, water, etc., and natural environmental conditions can be hostile. So only few can survive to tadpole stage, and again the tadpole are having different challenges they have to face of scarcity and scarcity of food, space and predation, and only a few can survive to adulthood. Okay, so any population has these variations, built-in variation, it is built-in. Next, fitness. Now he talks about fitness. In any population there is this fitness. There are two types of variance. Any population we take, there are two types of variation, and so these variations can be classified as favorable variation and unfavorable variation. To explain this, I will just take the case of what we have learnt in 10th standard CBSE, the red beetle and green beetle. We have learnt about the beetle story, and we saw it was the initial population was full of red beetles, but due to we know that sexual reproduction, there's chances of variation. There were some green beetles among the red beetles. Okay. And then the predator are the crows. We have learnt also in the 10th standard about the crows are the predators, and we after many years you are seeing the population initially started with red beetle, then because it was sexually reproducing form due to variation there was few green beetles, but after some years we are seeing the population comprised mainly of green beetles, and we know the answer, natural selection. Why it was natural selection there? Because these beetles, where did they live? They lived on green bushes, and because they lived on green bushes, the green camouflaged with the green background. The green beetles had the advantage, their color camouflaged or got harmonized with the background, so they were not easily detected by the bird, the crow. Whereas red beetle stood out and were picked up by the crow. So finally we had the favorable character here was a green color. It was favored Because it camouflaged with the background, and therefore the predator could not identify or distinguish them, and they were saved. Okay, so we see here the variation is color, red and green. So there are two variants, red and green. Though the initial population comprised red beetle, it does not mean that red should survive. Here the survival advantage was for the green. Why was the survival advantage was for the green? The predator, here nature operated in the form of predators. The predators could easily identify the red and pick and eat the red beetles. The green was saved because the color camouflaged with its surrounding. This is a very good example of variation. Any population has variation, and variation, some are favorable and the other option is unfavorable. And these green are called the fit ones, and they survive. Hence, those who are better fit in an environment leave more progeny than others. These therefore will survive more and hence are selected by nature. This is called natural selection. Okay, so with two examples I explained the two concepts of Darwin's theory of natural selection. The first concept I explained is about variation, taking the case of the frog and how many eggs it lays and how many eggs develop into the tadpole and the number of tadpole that are fated to become the adult frog. And the second case I am saying how nature is operating. Nature can be operating in the form of predation, it can be operating in the form of any calamity, it can be operating in any forms. Here in the case of the beetle, the nature operates in the form of a bird, the crow. And here the variation was the two color variants, red versus green. Here though red was the initial population color, it did not have an advantage, survival advantage. The survival advantage was for green. The very reason was that it could camouflage with the green background it was living on. So the bird could not identify the green and picked up the red beetle. So this is an example to explain Charles Darwin's theory. But the actual explanation for this goes with the two concepts. So broadly the two concepts Darwin's theory hold is, one is branching descent and the other one is natural selection. And these two will be dealt in the next class. Okay, so today's class is only dealing with theories of evolution. So I am going to deal with this in the next module. Next is Lamarck's theory. First postulate, continuous use of an organ results in its better development. Here you take the case of giraffe. The ancestor of giraffe was a horse-like with short neck and short legs. It used to graze the grass, but when the grass became over or got depleted, it started feeding on some shrubs, herbs, and slowly that also got depleted and it had to feed on the lower branches of trees, and in reaching the trees it had to stretch its neck and leg. In the process of stretching, what happened? The neck got stretched. So continuous use of an organ results in its better development. So as a result, the short necked giraffe developed long neck because it had to browse on the lower branches of trees, and in the process what happened? The neck became elongated. Okay, because of its continuous use, it became elongated, and that was inherited by its offspring. And when that giraffe gave birth, the offsprings that were born all had long neck. Now, the second postulate states that continuous disuse, opposite of that, disuse of an organ results in its degeneration. Here you can give many examples. I'll give the example of python. In the case of python, if you have observed python, it has rudimentary limbs at the hind end. Why it should have rudimentary limbs? It indicates that its ancestors had limbs, but these limbs were not used for crawling through the crevices and cracks of rocks. It was a hindrance, and because it became an hindrance, it was disused. It was not used for a long time. Therefore, what happened to the limbs? The limbs became reduced, and now we have two lumps on the hind end of the python, which is not of use, but it has all the structure of the limbs, which indicates that its ancestor had the limbs, but because of its continuous disuse, it degenerated, and this is inherited by its offspring. When it gave birth or when it laid eggs, all the offsprings were bearing this rudimentary limbs. A very good example is man. Man, we can say, is a museum of antiques. Why? There are lots of vestigial organs in our body which were used in our ancestors, but continuous disuse result in its degeneration, but it's still inherited by the offsprings. A very good example, the earlobe. Is there any use of the earlobe? But in our ancestors it was used to collect sound waves, but here we can live without a earlobe. It is not useful. So it was earlier it was very large, it was not used, therefore it became, because of this continuous disuse and disuse, became small and small and small and degenerated, and it is a vestigial organ. Then we know a number of vestigial organ in us. The caruncle, that is the nictitating membrane. Our ancestors had the nictitating membrane because our ancestors used to swim in the dirty water. The membrane used to cover the eye. But now it's not in use and it's present at the corner of our eye. Then the vermiform appendix. Our ancestors used to eat a lot of grass, and cellulose digestion used to take place in the vermiform appendix. But now what, are we eating raw grass? No. Now what has happened to the appendix? It has become very small and rudimentary. Even you can, if you have undergone an appendicitis operation, you can live without this vermiform appendix because it's not useful. Then our wisdom tooth at the hind end. Our ancestors used to crush and grind bones, raw meat and bones. But now it is not useful, and therefore it has degenerated and is present in the hind end, and it causes a lot of problem in us. It's a vestigial organ, no use. The food does not go to the hind end of our jaws for crushing or grinding. So that is also can be extracted. There are many vestigial organs in the human body to support the statement. Continuous disuse of an organ results in its degeneration. And all these characters, see the third postulates hold it, all these characters, whether it is better developed or degenerated, all these characters are acquired in the lifetime, are inherited by the offsprings. I hope Lamarck's theory is clear. Next theory, mutation theory. Mutation theory is exactly opposite of Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection. Mutation theory states that evolution is caused by sudden large differences in the population, which is caused by mutation. So what is evolution here is a result of a sudden large difference in the population, and this difference is random, directionless and not gradual, just the opposite of Darwin's theory of natural selection. To explain this, I'll just tell you about this, a very small incident to remember this. Mutation. All of a sudden a child is born with a long tail. You have heard, child is born with a very long tail. Okay, this example is a case of mutation. So if you analyze the father of the child, did the father of the child have a longer tail and grandfather a smaller tail and then great grandfather with a small tail? No, all of a sudden this child develops a long tail. So we can say it's a very large change. See, a large change, long tail, it's a large change, not that small tail the great grandfather had, then the grandfather have a little more larger tail, then the father have a longer tail and the child have a longer tail. No, all of a sudden the child has a long tail. So mutation says that the change is large, the change is not minor, major, then it's random, so all of a sudden in the population. Then directionless, if this child has grows big, it is operated and then he gets married and his child, will he get this tail? No, it's directionless, or go reverse way, his parents, grandparents, great grandparents, they didn't have the tail, so it's directionless. And it is not gradual. See, not gradual means, see the first case I said, great grandfather with small tail, then father with little more longer, then longer and he with long tail. No, just the opposite of natural selection. So the change is major, remember the change is major, it is random, then it is directionless, and it is not gradual. Whereas this always comes for CBSE, it comes versus mutation theory versus Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection. So Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection, I'll give it another color. It tells the changes are very minor, small change. Then it is not random, it is continuous, it is directional, and it is gradual. So the three differences. First difference, according to mutation theory, the changes are major, big changes, whereas according to Charles Darwin's theory, the changes are very minor. Then second, the changes are directionless, whereas in Charles Darwin theory it is directional. And last is the change is not gradual. According to mutation theory, it is not at all a gradual process. All of a sudden appears in the population and then disappears. Whereas here it is a very gradual change. Slowly we can see the gradual changes. Okay. So here itself, which I have compared here, due to minor variation that are directional as per Charles Darwin. And because mutation causes speciation in just one step, all of a sudden, see, the father has a child with a long tail. So sudden change, because it takes place in a single step, this is called saltation. Saltation means jumping. All of a sudden, a sudden leap. Okay. So these are the three theories, important theories under the CBSE. So once again, the first theory of evolution is put forward by Charles Darwin, that's called the theory of natural selection. The second theory is Lamarck's theory of evolution, and the third theory is the theory of mutation put forward by Hugo de Vries. And Hugo de Vries, I forgot to say, he observed the evening primrose and came up with these conclusions. Okay, and always mutation theory is always asked against Charles Darwin's theory because it's just the opposite. Once again, a recap of the differences. According to mutation theory, the changes are major. According to Charles Darwin's theory, the changes are minor. According to mutation theory, it is directionless, yet it's directional. And lastly, according to to mutation theory, it is not a gradual process, it's a sudden. Whereas according to Charles Darwin's theory, it is a very gradual process. And last theory, which is not there in your textbook, but the widely accepted theory is the theory, modern synthetic theory, which tells us origin of species is based on the interaction of genetic variation and natural selection. Both are needed. So they have incorporated natural selection and genetic variation. So, and a very good example is anthropogenic action. What is anthropogenic action? See, to get rid of mosquitoes, what do we apply? We apply DDT. To get rid of cockroach, we apply again some pesticides. So this application of pesticides, herbicides has resulted in the selection of resistant forms in a short period of time. As I told you, according to natural selection, any population has two variants. So we'll take the two varieties. Here, these are resistant form and these are sensitive forms. Okay, so take these are the mosquitoes. We all are familiar with mosquitoes because we are living with mosquitoes, and this is a very good example to explain this. Okay, a number of mosquitoes. Okay, there's a population with mosquitoes. Okay, this is the initial population. We don't know which is sensitive, which is resistant. There are two varieties. According to the theory, there are two varieties of mosquitoes, resistant and sensitive. We are applying DDT. Okay, DDT is applied. When DDT is applied, most of the mosquitoes die and only few mosquitoes survive. Okay, one or two mosquitoes survive. Okay, the population is controlled. But after some time, again you can see the population is re-established. Like the initial population, what must have happened? So here you should remember, the initial population has two types, the DDT sensitive and DDT resistant forms. When DDT was applied, the resistant forms had the survival advantage, but they were few in number. They mated and re-established the population, and all the sensitive forms perished. So in the initial population, when DDT was not applied, the sensitive were more in number and the resistant forms were few in number. But when DDT was applied, what happened? The resistant form had the advantage, survival advantage. They outnumbered. By mating, they re-established the population and the sensitive forms all perished. So in any population, there are two varieties. This is well explained with the case of beetles. Because of the color, the concept will be more clear. But most of the populations, it is sensitive and resistant. But the case of color is more easy to understand. So just make it similar to the color variance, where the green color was favorable. It had the survival advantage. Here, when DDT is present, see, this is the population of mosquito. When DDT is present, which mosquito will have survival advantage? the resistant form. When DDT is absent, which mosquito will have the survival advantage? Sensitive form. So, any population will have two varieties, and nature operates, and the variety which is fit will be surviving, and the survival advantage depends upon the condition. Here the condition, two conditions are there: DDT present, DDT absent. When DDT is present, resistant forms have the survival advantage, they will multiply. When DDT is absent, the sensitive forms have the survival advantage, they will multiply. I hope you have understood. Always relate with color, this concept will be more clear. So, the example to support modern synthetic theory of evolution is the anthropogenic action. Anthropogenic means man's action, not natural. We are applying to control pesticides, herbicides, etc. How much we control, after some time the population is re-established, and we will be wondering, we will be thinking, oh my god, we applied lots of Baygon spray or something, and again we see a population re-established. The reason is that any population will have two varieties, resistant and sensitive. I hope the concept is clear. The first three is very important. The last one is, the slight mention is given in the textbook, that is why I have explained with the help of examples. Then this can be applicable into bacteria. In any population, remember the two varieties, resistant and sensitive. I hope you have understood the theories of evolution as well as the theories of origin of life. Thank you.